I was walking off shift along the pier when a sedan fishtailed, hit the curb, and ended up hanging on its front wheels over open water, nose twisted down. I knew it was going to drop. I ran for the door, but in seconds the car tipped harder and slid off the edge. I reached the rail, took one breath, and went in after whoever was inside. The shift board said he had clocked 16 hours, but the ache in Michael's shoulders said 20. He zipped the last tarp, checked the chocks on a flatbed, and signed off a pallet that should have been logged 2 hours earlier. Cash from overtime sat folded in an envelope inside his jacket. Rent, groceries, the balance on Lucas's field trip. He thumbed out a text. Home in an hour. Eat the pasta. Alarm set for 6. A read receipt blinked. Then his son's reply. Got it. Homework done. Wind came in off the bay with a colder edge, throwing grit across the concrete. Gulls that had been bickering over a torn bait bag lifted as one and vanished into the dark. Lines creaked against bollards. The big cranes stood black and still like scaffolds for a sky that hadn't decided what to do yet. Michael sipped the last inch of coffee from a dented thermos and tasted metal and rain. He had learned to read weather in the Navy the way other men read faces. Pressure dropping, wind swinging southeast, a telltale hush between gusts, trouble gathering. He tugged his hood up and walked the pier again, counting steps, rechecking locks, a habit that kept problems small. A night watchman in a golf cart offered him a ride. Michael waved him on and kept moving. His phone vibrated with a calendar alert he didn't need. 10 years to the day since he filed the complaint that cost him his uniform. Back then he had written a clean memo. Dates, times, names. Because a medic doesn't look away when charts are falsified and patients pay for shortcuts. The fallout had been polite and total. A reassignment that led nowhere. A performance review that pivoted on team fit. An exit meeting with a thank you coin and no reference. He took what work he could find, buried his anger under routine, and kept the one rule that had not failed him: do the next right thing. Rain came hard now, not the mist he grew up with, but real weight that flattened the surface of the water. Sirens sounded uptown, then cut. A forklift coughed and died near the shed. Somewhere a loose halyard clanged against aluminum with a nervous, hollow rhythm. He checked the time again, did the math on sleep, and pictured Lucas sprawled on the couch with a book face down on his chest, mouth open, the boy who had learned too early to measure days by his father's shifts. Headlights appeared at the far end of the service road, 2 pale coins jittering through the weather. The car came too fast for the slick, tires whispering on oil and rain. It fishtailed near the break in the barrier, corrected, fishtailed again, and snapped sideways. Michael stopped walking. The sedan's nose kissed the curb, hopped it, and punched through the rusting rail as if it were made of string. For a second it hovered on its belly, back wheels spinning, taillights burning a crowded red into the downpour. Then gravity took its vote. Metal scraped, a scream of bolts giving up, and the car tipped and slid out of the world, dropping nose first into black water with a sound he felt in his ribs more than heard. The surface closed. Only bubbles and a smeared triangle of taillight remained, already paling under the storm. Michael's thermos hit the concrete and rolled. He was moving before it stopped. He ran, phone already to his ear. Vehicle in the water, Pier 7 service road, 1 occupant, send harbor patrol and EMS. He dropped the call, hit the red stanchion phone for the yard, barked the same facts, then yanked open the orange safety cabinet. Ring buoy. Throw line. Glass punch. He looped the line to a cleat, shrugged off his jacket and steel toes, jammed the punch and a folding knife into his back pocket, and went over the edge. The bay hit like a fist. Cold stole his breath and tried to lock his ribs. He forced a slow exhale, rolled to clear the chop, and sighted the smear of red tilting down into green. The sedan hung nose deep, back and up, trapped to a piling by the current. He kicked to the rear quarter, palmed along metal, found the door seam and tugged. No give. Pressure had it sealed. Side glass was the move. He pressed the punch to the lower corner of the rear window and fired. The tempered pain crazed, then folded inward under his shoulder. A dark bloom of air rushed past his face. He tucked his mouth, turned his head, and swept shards aside with his sleeve. Inside, a woman in a soaked dress thrashed against the lap belt, eyes wide and glassy. He put 2 fingers to his maskless lips, then pointed up. Slow, follow. He ducked into the cabin, braced one knee, and slid the blade under the belt. One clean pull. The belt snapped, and she pitched forward. He caught her, planted her hand on the seat back, and steered her toward the rear air pocket that clung to the roof like a held breath. Small sips, he said, steady and loud so she could read him. In, out. He watched her pupils find him. Panic retreated a notch. He checked her ankle with a quick thumb press, swelling under the strap, not the foot he needed for the kick. Good enough. He took her wrist, guided her through the broken window, kept her close to cut drag. The current tugged hard off the pilings. The rope on the ring buoy hummed against the cleat. They broke surface into rain and engine noise. She coughed hard and tried to grab his neck. He let her find his shoulder instead, rolled her onto her back, and set his forearm under her head to keep the airway clear. Look at me, he said. You're okay. Breathe. He swam one-armed for the ladder while she clung to him with cold fingers. The ring buoy swung on its line. He hooked it under her arms, took the strain, and hauled them the last meters to iron rungs. A yard hand in a neon slicker leaned down. Got you two out. Two, Michael said. She's conscious. Possible ankle sprain. No bleeding I can see. He felt for pulses, radial strong, carotid steady, then moved her hand to the ladder. One rung at a time. I've got you. They climbed. On the deck, he rolled her onto her side as she retched up bay water, then eased her flat and lifted the injured leg onto a coil of line. He checked distal pulse, cap refill, sensation. Pain when he dorsiflexed. No deformity. She needs a hospital, the yard hand said. Agreed, Michael answered, already peeling off his shirt to wrap her shoulders. Keep her warm. Blue strobes cut through rain. Harbor Patrol first, paramedics seconds later. Questions came clipped. Time under, contact point, consciousness, meds. Michael answered in order. The medic's hands mirrored his. Airway, breath sounds, pupils, ankle. You ride in, she told the woman. The woman shook her head once. No hospital. You aspirated, the medic said. We need a chest x-ray and to monitor for complications. No hospital, she repeated, voice hoarse but firm. Private doctor. I'll sign. Michael met the medic's eyes. The medic sighed and handed over a refusal form, kept the monitor on her finger anyway. The woman turned to Michael. Up close. Rain traced clean lines through mascara. She studied his left biceps where a faded caduceus and anchor sat above the elbow. You were a medic, she said. Was. What's your name? Michael. Your last name. He hesitated, then gave it to her straight. Torres. She nodded like she was filing it. A black SUV rolled to the curb, a driver scrambling with an umbrella. The woman let the medic tape her ankle, accepted a thermal blanket, then sat up with help. Thank you, she said, voice calm now, not dramatic. You saved my life. Do the scan, he said, even if it's private. I will. She glanced once more at the tattoo, then at his face, as if fitting pieces. Michael Torres, she repeated, and allowed the driver to guide her into the SUV. The door shut. The SUV eased away into rain. Harbor Patrol taped the break in the rail and logged the incident. The car below them shifted, then settled deeper, taillights gone. Michael stood with the ring buoy rope in his hands until his fingers stopped shaking. Then he picked up his jacket and dead thermos, texted running late. I'm fine, and went back to clear the pier. Morning came with the smell of damp rope baked into his jacket. Michael fried 2 eggs, slid them onto Lucas's plate, and pushed a worksheet across the table. Geometry first. Bus in 20. The boy ate fast, eyes flicking to his phone, then tucked the worksheet into a folder already swollen with handouts. At the door, Michael stopped him. Counselor today. 3rd period, Lucas said. They're talking scholarships. Listen, deadlines matter more than dreams. I know, Lucas said, not rolling his eyes, which counted as progress. The door shut. The apartment went quiet. At the school, the counselor kept her voice neutral. Grades strong, test scores fine, extracurriculars thin. Most awards want a leadership role and community hours verified. Also, there are fees. Small, but they add up. Michael did the numbers while she talked. Application costs, travel for interviews, new shoes for a boy who had outgrown everything. He thanked her, shook her hand, and walked back into a morning that already felt expensive. By noon, he was on Pier 7 again, rain scrubbed to a gray mist. He logged pallets, checked manifests, and pretended his hands didn't still shake when a forklift backed too close to the edge. A black SUV took the turn by the office with the kind of care that said driver, not owner. It rolled to a stop near the bollards. The rear door opened, and the woman from last night stepped out on a stabilized ankle, boot over a brace, coat cut sharp enough to slice wind. "Mr. Torres," she said. Not actress surprise, not social warmth. Measured. "May I have 5 minutes?" He glanced at the foreman, who pretended not to watch, and led her to the lee of a container stack. Up close, she looked rested. No theatrics in the face. The panic had been packed away with the blanket. "I wanted to say thank you without the noise," she said. "Private doctor, clear lungs, no aspiration." She paused. "I'm Isabella Chun." He waited. The name meant nothing to him in that moment, and he let it show. "Chun Maritime Group," she added. "Ports, terminals, logistics. My family's company." He nodded once. "You should replace the barrier on the service road. 2 supports are gone." "We will," she said, as if that had already been ordered. "I also have a request." She took out a slim folder, no logo on the cover. "We had an incident at our South Harbor terminal 2 months ago. Internal notes say operator error. I want an independent view of the safety chain." "I work nights and school hours," he said. "My schedule is not flexible." "I'm not asking for hours," she said. "I'm asking for a discrete product. 1 assessment memo, limited scope, paid on delivery. No office. No meetings beyond a kickoff. You choose times." "And why me?" Michael asked. "Because when it was easier to keep walking, you turned back," she said. "Because you asked a medic to do a chest x-ray instead of saying glad you're alive and walking away. Because someone who speaks in specifics is rare in my world." Her eyes flicked to his forearm. "And because I read the Navy tattoo the way you read weather." He opened the folder. Incident summary, names redacted, equipment list, shift logs, supervisor sign-off forms photocopied to death. Thin. He thumbed to the maintenance section and felt his jaw set. Weeks of inspections compressed into a single page. No tech initials, serials blurred, the kind of paperwork that was a photograph of compliance, not compliance. "What's the rate?" he asked, still reading. She named a number that would close 2 months of gaps. "Half on engagement, half on delivery," she added. "And a non-disclosure, but not the kind that gags findings. I want the truth more than quiet." He looked up. "If you want quiet, you hired the wrong person." "If I wanted quiet," she said, "I wouldn't be here." He read the last page. A photo from the terminal camera, a crane idling, a container skewed, a man on the ground holding his shoulder while a supervisor looked at a tablet instead of the scene. He slid the photo back into the sleeve. "I'll need the unredacted logs," Michael said. "Original maintenance books, not copies. Operator certifications. Vendor invoices for parts, last 6 months. You'll have them by tonight," she said. "And an encrypted link." He closed the folder. "Then the answer is yes." He offered his hand. Her grip was firm, skin still cold from the mist. The SUV door shut behind her with a soft, expensive sound. She didn't look back. Michael stood with the folder and felt the familiar alignment of anger and purpose that had once made him good at a job he had loved. He walked to the break room, cleared a spot on a stained table, and laid out the pages in a grid. Maintenance. Logs. Signatures. He drew a quick timeline on a shipping label and set the forms against it. A single date sat wrong. An inspection on a Sunday by a tech who, according to the copied roster, worked Monday through Friday. The signature was a loop and a dash. No badge number. He flipped to the equipment sheet. Serial numbers for the braking assemblies were identical across 3 cranes, a neat impossibility. He exhaled, short and even. The folder had not been thinned by accident. It had been curated. Somewhere between the machine and the file, days had been cut. If the missing pieces were deliberate, they had a branch and a motive. He texted Lucas. "Late again. Pizza tonight. Keep receipts." Then he circled the Sunday entry in red grease pencil and wrote one word in the margin where he could not miss it when he came back from the next call-out. Missing. That evening, Isabella sent him secure access to the terminal records. He replied with one line about scope and boundaries. Remote work only. Written deliverables. A 1-week timeline. She agreed without conditions. He opened the maintenance system and read. Many work orders were marked closed with no technician notes. Safety checklists were marked complete without tool IDs or torque values. Brake inspections on 3 separate cranes all listed the same part serial. That cannot happen. He asked for originals. Compliance sent scans of paper forms. The ink color changed mid-page. Initials looked like a single loop with no printed name or badge number. One annual brake test appeared on a Sunday for 3 cranes by a technician listed as weekday only. He checked camera indexes for that window. No maintenance cart ever reached those cranes. He checked operator hours for the day of the incident. 2 operators had pushed past the company limit. The tailboard form for the evening crew was a line-for-line copy of the morning sheet, smudge and all. That meant no fresh hazard review. He sent Isabella a short report in plain language. He described falsified maintenance records, impossible serial duplication, shift length violations, and a suspect vendor that billed above market from a mailbox address. He asked her to freeze edits to the system, pull access logs, suspend the 3 cranes for physical inspection, and hold payments to the vendor until verified. She answered within minutes and told him to proceed. She would issue the suspension herself. Expect resistance. Document everything. An anonymous message arrived in his personal inbox after that. No greeting. A warning about his Navy file, and a line about families needing incomes. He took a screenshot, saved the headers, and told Isabella he had received intimidation. He would continue. Before dawn, he met an independent inspector at South Harbor with Isabella's written authorization in his pocket. They ran basic checks with the cranes down. Measure brake gap, look at pad wear, test limit switches, pull an emergency stop. Crane 4 failed the stop test on the first pull. The response lagged beyond specification. He placed a lockout tag and photographed the tag on the control handle. Compliance showed up late. Quan held a clipboard and kept his smile tight. He said the department often used consolidated sign-offs. He said legacy process covered the differences. Michael pointed to the access log that showed edits after the incident and to the camera index that showed no Sunday work. He kept his voice even and made no accusations. The facts did not need volume. He sent Isabella a second report that summarized the failed stop test, the tag out, and the inspection notes. He recommended immediate notice to the board under the company's safety escalation policy. She replied that the board would meet that afternoon and that his report would be attached. On the drive to Lucas's school, he set work aside and went back to his rule. Keep boundaries. Pick up the boy. Ask about classes. Make dinner. When Lucas asked if they could afford the trip fee next month, Michael said yes. He would make it true. Back at the apartment, he reopened the vendor files. The shell company that supplied the brake parts had appeared 3 months before the first invoice. The price sat 28% above the other approved suppliers. Payment dates lined up too neatly with gaps in the maintenance logs. He printed the invoice list and drew a simple chain on the margin: order, delivery, signature, payment. The signatures that should have been there were copies. The names that should have been printed were missing. He sent Isabella one more note, short and direct. The records he had were enough to show a pattern. To fix it, they needed 2 steps now. Preserve every edit trail and place an independent team on the 3 cranes until the brakes and switches were certified in writing by a technician outside the chain of command. She answered with one sentence he recognized as a decision, not a courtesy. The preservation order had been issued. The cranes would stay down until cleared. The board would hear the rest face to face. Isabella called before the board session. She said the suspension order stood and the preservation notice had gone out to every manager. She also said Quan was already arguing about legacy practices. Michael told her he needed to speak with the oldest mechanic on the crew. She gave him the name and cleared the access. Delgado was in the maintenance bay wiping grease from a spreader lock. He had 30 years in and the posture of someone who had carried weight too long. Michael asked straight questions. When did consolidated sign-offs start? Who brought in the new parts vendor? Why Sunday inspections appeared in logs with no tech on site? Delgado looked at the door, then at the camera under the eave, and kept his voice low. After the founder's stroke, supervisors signed stacks at once. The new vendor arrived with approvals already in place. Anyone who objected lost overtime or got moved to the worst shifts. He would not put this on paper. He did point to the east storage and told Michael to check the parts cage himself. Michael requested supervised access. Quan arrived with a key and a smile that had more patience than goodwill. The cage held sealed crates and labeled bins. Michael asked for the brake modules tied to the invoices he had flagged. Quan searched, moved boxes, and produced 2 unopened crates with the same vendor label. Michael checked the packing slips. Both listed the same serialized unit ID. He compared the labels against the scanned invoices on his phone. The numbers matched exactly. 2 identical serialized units cannot exist. Either the paper was false or the parts were. He photographed the labels, the seals, and the slips. He asked for the receiving log. The signature on both entries was the same loop he had seen on the maintenance sheets. No printed name. No badge number. Quan said consolidated sign-off was efficient. Michael said efficiency was not the point. Back home, Lucas pushed curfew by an hour and came in with a story about a group project that took longer. Michael kept the correction simple. Curfew stood because it kept him safe when Michael could not be in 2 places at once. Lucas disagreed but accepted the limit. They ate quickly and left the dishes for morning. Isabella read his note about Delgado and the duplicate cereals and called again. He told her what the mechanic had said without putting the man at risk. She was quiet for a long beat and then said the pattern reached back to her father's years. She said that did not change the duty to fix it now. She asked what he needed next. He told her to pull the receiving camera for the 2 crates and the bank records for the shell vendor. He told her to move the brake inspections to an independent shop outside the existing chain. She said she would do both. In the morning, he went back to the cage with the independent inspector. They broke the seals under Quan's eye. The first crate held a remanufactured assembly with a ground-off original plate and a fresh sticker from the shell vendor. The second was empty except for wrapping and a receipt. The receipt had the same serial number as the first. Quan said this was a storage mistake. Michael said it was evidence. He documented the scene. Photos from 3 angles. A short statement written in pen and signed by the inspector. The inspector kept a copy. Michael sent Isabella a concise summary. Duplicate serials recorded and present on paperwork. 1 crate arriving empty. A remanufactured part disguised as new. A receiving signature that matched the loop on maintenance sheets. He recommended that she notify the board that the incident was not an isolated error, but a system built to hide risk and extract money. Delgado passed him in the corridor on the way out. He did not stop, but he said one thing as he walked by. The good techs had tried to protest when the changes came. The men who pushed back were told they were not team players. After that, people stopped asking questions. Michael thanked him without turning it into a scene. He ended the day with a single page on his table at home. At the top he wrote, maintenance falsified, operator fatigue, vendor fraud, receiving fraud. Under each line, he listed 1 clean proof. He put the photos beside the page and read them once more. The next step was clear. Present it all at once, in sequence, in terms that left the board no way to claim confusion. He sent Isabella one last message that night. The findings were ready for a formal presentation. She replied that she wanted him in the room. He reminded her of his boundary. She said she understood. He would not attend. She would carry it. He would prepare the record so it could not be twisted. Before he slept, he checked on Lucas and then opened his email. A second anonymous note waited for him. It said he should think about what his son would lose if the story went public. He flagged it, saved it, and added it to the file labeled threats. Then he set his alarm and turned off the light. Michael assembled the record the way he had treated patients. 1 clean sequence, no gaps. Maintenance falsified. Operator fatigue. Vendor fraud. Receiving fraud. Physical test failure with a tagout and 2 signatures. He wrote the ask in plain language. Preserve every edit. Keep the cranes down. Shift inspections to an independent shop. Notify the authorities. He sent the packet and stayed off-site. Boundaries held. Isabella walked into the boardroom with the document printed and tabbed. She opened with the facts. The cameras did not show the work that the logs claimed. The audit trail showed edits after the incident. 2 operators worked past policy limits. A shell company billed above market and shipped a remanufactured part as new. 1 crate arrived empty while the paperwork said otherwise. She did not add adjectives. She did not raise her voice. She put photographs and signatures where the excuses would try to live. A few directors tried to minimize it. Legacy practices. Industry norms. Consolidated sign-offs. She cut that short. A safety policy is not a phrase. It is a system that either holds or fails. This one had failed. She announced the suspension of the affected cranes until independent certification. She froze payments to the shell vendor and instructed counsel to begin recovery. She directed IT to secure the maintenance system and deliver a complete edit log. She told compliance to stand down and cooperate fully with an external audit. Quan started to object and stopped when she asked him whether he could defend the Sunday entries on camera. Lau pressed back hard. He called the incident isolated. He called Michael an unproven contractor with a grudge. Isabella answered that the evidence existed before the man touched any file and that the tests in the yard did not care about anyone's resume. She stated the next steps on the record. Bring in an outside safety firm. Inform the insurer. Inform the Port Authority. Prepare a referral for law enforcement. She asked if there was any director unwilling to sign the preservation notice. No one raised a hand. She called Michael from her office after the room cleared. She recited the actions taken without flourish. Independent inspections starting the next morning. Vendor contracts placed under review. The maintenance platform locked for forensic copy. She said the company would reimburse the day's lost shifts. He told her to anchor the message to safety and process, not to him. She said the same rule applied to praise. If this ended well, the credit would go to the system they were building, not to a headline. He asked for 3 additional items. Written authorizations for technicians to speak without fear of retaliation. Direct access to the receiving cameras for the crates in question. A clean chain of custody for every part pulled. She agreed. She added one of her own. He would train a small internal team to read maintenance and audit logs the way he did, so the skill would outlast him. He accepted. The first independent report arrived that evening. It confirmed what he had already seen on the ground. Brake response outside specification on one crane. Limit switch were inconsistent with logged inspection dates. The findings matched his notes line for line. Isabella forwarded it to the board with a short message about next actions and copied the insurer and counsel. The tone was steady. The company had been warned by facts and would answer with facts. For a few hours the pressure eased. Lucas did homework at the table while pasta boiled on the stove. Michael checked his list, crossed off items, and made a fresh one. He kept the house quiet on purpose. It helped both of them think. Then the first leak surfaced. A trade blog posted a short piece about chaos at Chin Maritime, claiming a consultant had forced costly shutdowns and that the new chair was overreacting. The story quoted no one by name, but used details that had only been said in the boardroom. Lau called an emergency session for the next day and circulated a draft motion to remove Michael from any role. The note ended with a line about stability for the market. Isabella forwarded the link to Michael and added a single sentence. She would not trade safety for the appearance of calm. He replied with the only thing that mattered. Hold the line. Keep the record clean. He went to bed and slept in pieces. In the morning, he would give the outside auditors everything they needed and keep the focus where it belonged. On the ledger, not the noise. The leak grew teeth. Anonymous accounts posted a cropped Navy form with his name and a line about fitness for duty. A blogger wrote that he had left under a cloud. No source. No context. The copy spread faster than the correction. Lucas saw it at school. He called from a stairwell and kept his voice steady. He asked if it was true. Michael said what mattered. He had reported malpractice. He had not been asked to return because of it. Lucas said he understood. The pause said it still hurt. Isabella's communications head recommended a clean cut. Remove Michael from all work, issue a short statement about continuity, move on. Investors would calm. Headlines would fade. Isabella said safety came first, and that removing the person who found the risk would advertise the wrong lesson. Lau sent a written demand. End Michael's engagement or face a vote on leadership. He framed it as market stability. He attached the trade post and the blog as if they were evidence. Michael sent Isabella an offer to resign. He wrote that he would finish his notes and step back. He wrote that her position mattered more than his contract. She called at once. She said she would defend the process, not a person. She said the record was clear and that the next meeting would address the facts, not the noise. He did not argue. He prepared a short handover in case she needed it. At the terminal, Quan kept the cranes down but slowed every request. He misplaced camera clips. He labeled boxes with vague tags. Michael logged each delay and kept the auditors close. They pulled a second remanufactured part with a fresh sticker over a ground plate. The auditors signed the chain of custody and took it off-site. The work stayed clean while the talk dirted everything around it. Another message arrived in Michael's inbox. This one used his son's name. It said the boy deserved a steady life. It told him to stop. He saved it and sent it to Isabella and counsel. He did not answer it. By evening, the story had shifted. A maritime workers page reposted his tag-out photo and asked why anyone would fight an emergency stop test. A union steward called. He said men had been hurt under the old regime and that his members backed the shutdown until the inspections were finished. Michael thanked him and reminded him that praise was not the point. He asked for statements from injured workers. The steward agreed. Lau set the next session for the morning and repeated his threat. Remove Michael or face the vote. The note was short and cold. The choice was meant to feel narrow. Michael cleared his table. He placed the 4 pillars in order: falsified maintenance, fatigue, vendor fraud, receiving fraud. He added the independent test failures and the crate evidence. He added the union support. He read it twice. The line held. Before sleep, he stood in Lucas's doorway. The boy was awake and asked the question again with fewer words. Would they be okay? Michael said yes. It would be hard and then better. He had said the same words in hospitals and believed them now. He turned off the hall light and went back to the file. The noise would be loud in the morning. The ledger was louder. The smear kept pulling focus from the work. Michael drafted a formal resignation so Isabella could remove the target and salvage the agenda. He deleted it and wrote it again. He sent her a short note. He would step back if it protected the safety program. She called it once and said no. The board would hear facts. If they wanted a vote, they would vote with the full record in front of them. Lucas waited for him at the kitchen table. He had the blog open on his phone. If you quit because they lie, he said, what do I learn? Michael answered the only way that made sense. You learn to finish the job. He closed the phone and put it in a drawer. Boundaries returned the room to normal. He went back to the vendor trail. The shell supplier's invoices lined up with gaps in the maintenance logs. He pulled public filings and traced the LLC to a registered agent who handled dozens of one-room companies at the same mailbox store. He matched ACH payment dates to email traffic in the audit export. Lau's assistant had forwarded internal cost sheets to a private address on the same days the shell vendor billed. The private address shared a recovery number with a holding company that owned a small stake in a rival shipping syndicate. He asked Isabella for receiving camera clips tied to the 2 suspect crates. The first showed a courier dropping a sealed box and a supervisor signing without inspection. The second showed a box arriving light, the supervisor signing again without opening it. The signature matched the loop on the maintenance sheets. He clipped the frames and labeled them plainly. Crate delivered, no inspection. Crate delivered light, no inspection. He called the independent auditor and asked for a sworn appendix that described the remanufactured part with the ground plate and the fresh sticker. The auditor agreed and sent a draft the same day. Chain of custody was intact. Photos matched the crate labels. Isabella met a lawyer she trusted outside the company. She carried the packet without commentary: falsified maintenance, fatigue violations, vendor fraud, receiving fraud, test failures, camera clips, union support, intimidation messages. The lawyer read and asked for 2 things: email headers for the threats and a clean export of the maintenance edit log. Isabella provided both. The lawyer said the next step was a formal referral. A federal liaison would need to see the material. Isabella said fine. The company would cooperate. Michael typed a 1-page summary for injured workers. He asked the union steward to gather signed statements about prior incidents and pressure to cut corners. The steward sent him 3 names. 2 men described being told to keep cranes moving despite warning lights. 1 woman described being reassigned after she refused to sign a stack of blank forms. Michael kept every statement short, dated, and signed. Quan tried a new angle. He said the shop could clear 1 crane quickly if the tag-out was lifted for diagnostics. Michael said no. Diagnostics happen with power isolated. He reminded Quan that the outside inspector had authority and that the tag stayed until certification. Quan stopped arguing and started documenting, which was the point. Lau circulated his motion again. Remove Michael and restore stability. He asked directors to commit before the meeting. He promised a press line about overcorrection. Isabella replied to all with the agenda: review of findings, independent report, actions taken, next steps, and a motion on safety policy. She did not mention the vote. In the evening, Michael built the board packet the way he had learned to build a field report. Each claim had a document, a photograph, or a signature behind it. No adjectives, No speculation. A page for maintenance fraud. A page for fatigue. A page for vendor and receiving fraud. A page for the failed stop test. A page for the camera clips. A page for intimidation. A page for worker statements. The final page listed actions already taken and the next actions required by policy and law. Lucas read over his shoulder and pointed at the last line. That's the part that matters, he said. Michael agreed. The remedy was the story. Isabella called once more before the meeting. She said outside counsel had prepared the referral. She said the liaison had been briefed and would be on standby. She asked Michael if he wanted his resignation on paper as a contingency. He said no. If she lost the vote because he stayed, the company had bigger problems than one contractor. She said understood. Nights settled with ordinary sounds. Water in the pipes. A neighbor's door. The refrigerator cycling. Michael checked the locks and put the packet by the door. In the morning, he would deliver it and then step back while Isabella carried it into the room. The crisis was simple now. Hold the line or let it bend. The board convened. Michael handed the packet to the assistant outside the boardroom and sat in the foyer. He texted Lucas that he would be late and turned his phone face down. Doors closed. Voices rose and fell behind them. Inside, Isabella opened with what had been done, not what was rumored. The cranes remained suspended. Independent inspectors were on site. Edit trails and camera clips were preserved. Insurance and outside counsel had been notified. She moved to the record. She showed the maintenance pages that claimed Sunday work by a weekday technician. She laid the audit screen beside them that logged edits after the incident by a supervisor account. She put up the 2 tailboard forms that matched line for line. She cited the operator hours that exceeded policy. She did not add commentary. She showed receiving footage. A sealed crate signed without inspection. Another crate carried light, signed the same way. The signature on both matched the loop on the maintenance sheets. She showed photos from the cage, a remanufactured brake assembly with a ground plate and a fresh sticker, an empty crate with a duplicate serial on its slip. The independent report confirmed a failed emergency stop test on Crane 4 and were inconsistent with log dates. She walked through the vendor. The shell company billed above market and used a mailbox address. Payments from the company aligned with gaps in maintenance. She traced the account through a registered agent to a holding firm that shared a recovery number with a rival syndicate. She displayed 3 internal emails forwarded by Lau's assistant to a private address before each shell invoice. Outside counsel sat at the end of the table with a neat stack of subpoenas ready if the board requested them. A federal liaison observed without speaking. Lau called it conjecture. He said the company needed stability. Isabella kept him on specifics. Did he authorize consolidated sign-offs? Did he approve Sunday entries by a weekday tech? Did he have a relationship with the mailbox vendor? His answers slid sideways. Counsel asked him to state whether he had any financial interest tied to the vendor or the rival. He demanded to see the source data. She placed the packet in front of him and waited. He did not touch it. She read 3 short worker statements. An operator ordered to run through warnings. A tech reassigned after refusing blank sign-offs. A loader injured under a supervisor who ignored fatigue rules. She noted intimidation messages sent to the consultant, including his son's name. She said this would be referred. She returned to policy. Safety was not discretionary. The company would maintain locked edit trails, independent certification for critical systems, fatigue caps that would not move, vendor due diligence, and direct reporting channels that bypassed any manager implicated in past failures. She asked for a vote. The board voted to remove Lau from duties pending investigation, to cooperate with law enforcement, to suspend the vendor, to approve independent certification before any crane returned to service, and to adopt the safety policy as written. The vote was recorded. Counsel collected signatures. The liaison took the packet. In the foyer, the doors opened. Isabella stepped out, eyes clear, voice even. Lau had resigned from the board. Compliance would be restructured. The referral had been made. She said the policy passed without amendments. Michael asked what she needed next. She said she needed him to stay on, but only on his terms. Remote, fixed scope, authority to tag out equipment without interference, and a small team he would train to read logs, pull evidence, and escalate without fear. He said yes and set 2 conditions. Boundaries around his hours. Written protections for any tech who reported pressure to falsify records. She agreed to both and added one more. He would design the training and leave behind a system that worked without him. He gathered the remaining exhibits and looked at the cranes through the window. Tags hung where they should. Workers stood in small groups, waiting for direction. Isabella said she would address them herself. He said to keep it short. Tell them what failed, what would change, and when they would be paid. No slogans. She nodded. Come when you're ready, she said. Or go home and see your son. The line will hold. He chose home. He texted Lucas from the curb that they were okay and that pizza still stood. The reply came back fast. Good. I'm hungry. He put the packet on the seat and started the car. The meeting was done. The record was intact. The rest was work. The week after the vote, Isabella posted a clear schedule. Independent inspectors would certify each crane one by one. Edit trails would be locked and mirrored. A direct line would bypass managers and land on an external auditor's desk. Workers would be paid for any lost shifts. The union signed the plan and posted it in the break rooms. Michael signed a fixed-scope contract. Remote work. Defined deliverables. Authority to tag out equipment without interference. An escalation path that went straight to the top when a supervisor blocked a safety step. Hours set around Lucas's school and evenings. No meetings past dinner. The company put it in writing. Quan moved to documentation under a new compliance head recruited from outside the industry. The shell vendor went dark. Council froze related accounts and sent notices to recover payments. The investigation widened beyond the port. Michael kept his notes plain and his responses brief. He stayed off camera and let the system carry the weight. He built a short training and taught it to a small team. How to read maintenance entries against camera indexes. How to match invoices to receiving logs. How to spot copies passed off as new forms. He ran them through 3 case studies from other industries so they would not memorize his examples and miss the next pattern. He handed them checklists that fit on one page and told them to use pencils, not markers, because pencils force edits to show. He asked the union for 4 veterans who wanted steady work. 2 medics, 1 machinist, 1 avionics tech. He trained them to audit safety chains and to write memos in simple language. He told them to keep a clean file and a hard spine. They did. Crane 4 returned to service after a full rebuild and an independent sign-off. The tag stayed on the wall as a reminder of what had failed. Isabella kept that policy across the yard. She moved legacy contracts through external review and cut the ones that did not meet the new standard. She sold a legacy property and directed the funds to infrastructure upgrades, brakes, controls, lighting, and better cameras that showed the whole apron, not just a circle around a gate. Michael sent short weekly notes. What had cleared? What was pending? What had slipped? He never wrote more than a page. The board stopped arguing details and asked only if a step was complete. He kept the answers binary. The smears faded when there was nothing left to feed them. A trade press item ran a follow-up about the new policy and the union's support. Michael clipped it and filed it under noise, then forgot about it. At home, Lucas kept to curfew and brought home a letter about a scholarship interview. Michael bought a second-hand blazer and had it altered at a shop that charged fair prices and spoke straight. They ate better because the hours were steady. The apartment looked less like a staging area and more like a place meant for living. Isabella called him less and wrote more. Work settled into clear requests and clean answers. When she did call, the conversation stayed inside the rails. Progress, blockers, next week's checks. Later she told him she had listed the last asset tied to her father's name. When it sold, she moved a portion to a fund that would pay for independent audits every quarter without a vote. In the spring, inspectors signed the final crane back into service. The yard sounded normal again, but the habit of counting steps had shifted. Men checked harnesses without being told. Supervisors read tailboards instead of copying them. A whiteboard at the shop tracked open findings with dates, initials, and next actions. No one erased lines before the work was done. They met at the pier that evening. Wind pushed a steady chop into the basin. A container ship edged past the breakwater with its deck lights stacked like a ladder. Lucas leaned on the rail and named countries from the hull markings. Isabella stood with her hands in her coat and watched the pilot boat peel away. Michael did not offer speeches. He told her the week's last items were closed and that the next list was shorter than the last. She said that was the point. Fewer lines each week until the system held without names attached. Lucas asked if they could get noodles on the way home. They could. Isabella said she would meet them there after one stop. She walked back down the pier to thank the night crew. Michael watched her go, then looked out at the ship clearing the channel. Storms would come again. Lines had to hold. He felt the rail under his hands and the quiet weight of a day that had ended where it should. Lucas nudged him and pointed at the wake. Michael nodded. Isabella returned and stood beside them. No one talked for a while. The ship passed with a low horn and moved into open water. They turned toward the lot and the light over the gate. It was enough.